Good afternoon. It's great to see everyone. This is our second in a four-part series that we are doing on retired rabbis reflecting. One of the wonderful things about being a synagogue in South Florida is that many rabbis make their way to South Florida after they have retired from their careers, and many of them joined Temple Bethel, which we are blessed to have many rabbis as our members, and we don't take that for granted at all. And this month we're actually highlighting it by having, for this week and last week, Rabbi Mordechai Schreiber, and for the next 2 weeks coming up, Rabbi Steve Moss, who you'll meet next week. So I asked Rabbi Schreiber, just before he gets into his book that he wrote on millennials and how they can utilize Moses as a model from Christian, Muslim, and Jewish faith. I had asked Rabbi Schreiber just to speak a little bit about his where he was born and brought up and his career, because it's a little bit of a shameless plug for an Israel circle that we're starting. Rabbi Schreiber was born in British Mandate Palestine, in the land of Israel, not the state of Israel. It didn't exist yet. He and his wife and Jim Schiller and Sue Schiller, Jim is very active in Zionist activities worldwide. We're starting an Israel circle. So it's an attempt to be some higher level conversation on Israel, and Rabbi Schreiber will be actually our first speaker. And I'll put the details. There's an informational meeting and then a first meeting. I'll put the informational meeting details in the chat. But Rabbi Schreiber, before we get into the book, just tell us a little bit about how you ended up being born in British Mandate Palestine, how your parents ended up there, and what your early childhood was like, and how it impacted you to become, of all things, a Reform rabbi, because as we know, like, the Reform movement in Israel deals with struggles to this day. So I just want to do a little bit of that before. Sorry, if you can unmute and you can.
Okay, thank you, Jessica, Rabbi Jessica. Nice to be with you people this morning under these strange conditions. I'd rather see you Friday night at shul, but you know, it is what it is. I was born in Haifa in 1939 when World War II broke out, because of my great good fortune that my mother and my father, each separately, from nearby villages in eastern Poland, made an incredible decision for 19, 20-year-olds to make in those days, you know, not talking about today's transportation, to leave home where the families lived for many generations. They saw the writing on the wall. They understood what Jabotinsky, the great Zionist leader, was going around Poland and saying, Jews, get out when there is still time. And most Jews didn't pay any attention. You know, they didn't get it. My father paid attention, and my mother did too. I guess there was something rebellious about them. Israel was not started by people who, you know, were sitting and feeling comfortable. It started by people who were restless and reckless. So they met in a kibbutz in the Galilee on the British Mandate, and I was their first child. That's how the story begins. And then life took me all around the planet. My last 15 years, I was a cruise rabbi. So I saw about 200 countries. I've been to corners of the world where very few people get to, very remote. And I'm not writing a book about it, by the way. I may mention this again in a different context later. But that in a nutshell is a story of my very peripatetic life, which also includes the HUC campus in Cincinnati, the campus in New York, and so on and so forth. And my first pulpit in Guatemala, of all places, because I speak Spanish. So it's a long, long story. Like we say in Yiddish, a lange Meise.
So interesting. So Rabbi Schreiber, today we're going to have you talk more about the book, Moses and Millennials. I have it here behind me, and I'm going to put the link in the chat as well, and then we'll look at some midrashim on Moses. So I'll hand things back over to you, and I'll put the link to buy the book in the chat.
I've been writing books now for 55 years. If you look on Amazon and look my name or my pen name is also Maurice Sofer, which is the Hebrew version of my German name, you will see, I don't know, about 65 titles. So I've been writing nonstop for 55 years, but I must tell you that this latest book, which I wrote for the first time with two other people. Well, I've written books a couple of times with another author, but this time 3 authors. It's not the fact that we have 3 authors. It's the fact that one is a Muslim scholar, the other one is a Christian scholar, and I'm the Jewish partner. I don't know too many books. I don't even know if I know any books written by 3 people of these 3 different religions. And to me, the most amazing thing about this experience is not just that we wrote a book and published the book, promoting the book. It's that we spend a year and a half in such harmony, in such, like the Germans say, Gemütlichkeit, which means, you know, very, very comfortable and cozy. Never really disagreeing. There was one little tiny point about a goat and a kid, you know, it was a sheep, which is in a midrash story about Moses, which Jessica told us the last time. But here we are, our religions for centuries fighting each other, killing each other, as if we are doomed to never know any peace. And I learned a very, very big life lesson late in life. I just turned 82. So I'm not, you know, I'm not a spring chicken, although I feel like one. But I learned a big life lesson. It doesn't have to be that way. You know, we can get along. We have a lot more in common than what separates us. Because most of what separates us is man-made, is artificial. It's the will of the ones who are out to exploit us and take advantage of us. But when we present ourselves as genuine human beings to one another, you know, Jews and Arabs are cousins. Jews and Christians are spiritual brothers and sisters. Why all the fighting? Why all the violence for all these things? So I learned a huge lesson, which inspired me to start writing a new book about how to get the world together, which is what I'm working on right now. So let's see, what else do I need to say?
Tell us about the Moses and the Millennial book. I don't know if there's a part you want me to bring up or not. Okay. But talk more, because we had our 2 guests last time. Talk more about the Jewish perspective and what points you wanted to get across, because we had your Muslim and Christian colleague with us last time.
Let me just explain a technical.
Oh. I'm sorry, Rabbi Schreiber, you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Ian Walk, the Episcopalian, he was the main writer, and he would tell the other 2, myself and Dr. Unus, the Muslim, what he needed to put in the book. So he provided the frame for the book, the overall structure. And then he would ask us, for example, which Jewish figure in contemporary law, in recent times, would you point us as a key figure in Judaism? And I gave him Theodor Herzl, who was really the father of the state of Israel, the one who got it started. The Muslim guy gave sort of a surprising example, but Malcolm X, who was an American black Muslim, controversial, but then again, one who played an important role in the process of the civil rights movement in the United States. So that's one example of how we brought our different perspectives together. Then we took stories about Moses. I didn't quite realize until then that there are more references in the Quran, in the holy book of Islam, there are more references to Moses than even to their founding father, who was Muhammad. Moses is all over the place. The reverence of the Muslims towards Moses is incredible. Now, the Christians also, give Moses credit for giving us the Ten Commandments, and without Moses, there wouldn't be a Jesus. They understand that. But the Muslims are the ones who surprised me. To what a degree Musa, as they call it, Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, is so prominent in their experience to the point where many Arabs, many Muslims believe that Moses was an Arab, not a Jew, because he's so much part of their tradition. So I began to understand why three people like us, with our different traditions, when we face what you might call the leadership crisis that the world is experiencing right now, it's everywhere. From the Philippines to Brazil, from Russia to China, from the United States to Israel, there's a leadership crisis everywhere. I just read something from our reform leader in Israel about they're not able to form a government. It's all up in the air. It's a political crisis, the likes of which I've never seen from day one, when Israel started 70 some years ago. So we have a huge leadership crisis in the world. And why is Moses the best example of a historical leader that we need to take another look at? And now, it was such a long time ago. Why would millennials be interested in Moses? Well, great American philosopher George Santayana said, those who don't study history are condemned to relive its mistakes, its disasters, etc. So
I'm going to pull up the part of the book where you acknowledge the kind of the leadership crisis that exists in the world, just so we can see the book a little bit.
Okay.
And I'll read this here. In this context, that Walter Lippmann, an early 20th century two-time Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, author, and public intellectual, used the word custodian regarding leadership when he referenced a keeper or a guardian. Lippmann saw few men and women who understood what it meant to be true leaders, people he described as the custodians of a nation's ideals, the beliefs it cherishes, of its permanent hopes, of the faith which make a nation out of a mere aggregation of individuals. Lippmann was a lifelong observer of leadership, especially in the shaping of public opinion. True leaders, according to Lippmann, whether they are permanent or temporary, are custodians in the service to a larger group and cause. Conversely, false leaders would be dedicated only to amassing a group that will serve his or her ego. Lippmann is credited with establishing the formal study of leadership dynamics. Do you want to talk about Moses in relation to that idea of leaders who get it and leaders who don't get it?
Yes. And I'm glad you brought up Walter Lippmann, because he was one of the greatest journalists in American history, second to none. He was amazing. And yes, the greatness of Moses primarily resides in the fact that the Bible tells us, I believe at the end of the book of Deuteronomy, before Moses dies, that Moses was the most humble of anybody who walked the earth. Humility, truly great leaders are usually humble, not arrogant, not me. Well, Ben Gurion was a little arrogant. Yeah, maybe. Um, I'm sure Napoleon was arrogant, but truly the kind of leaders who transformed history, who didn't just conquer countries like Napoleon, who didn't win World War II like Churchill. Those were the belligerent ones, but the ones who really, gave us the great ideas and established civilization. Those were humble people. African Americans like to use the expression the servant leader. The leader is supposed to serve his people, not tell the people what to do and not to lord over them. So Moses uh, is the model for millennials, because millennials also, from what my friend Ian, the other author, who teaches, by the way, journalism at Kansas State University, he works with millennials. He knows them better than me. And he says that they believe in diversity, inclusion, and but they are not, don't believe in managing from the top down, but from the bottom up, which is one of the big concepts in leadership. I want to mention here that the reason why Israel, because think about it, when Israel started, there were only 500,000 of us. That's it. In an ocean of millions and millions of Arabs. How did we win? How did we overcome? How did we manage to pull out of this? We didn't stand a chance except for one thing: leadership. What was the idea of leadership? I'm talking about the newly formed Israeli army, which was born in 1948. If you had a platoon and you had a platoon commander and a second in command and a third, everybody in the platoon was taught leadership, which the Arabs never did. They had a leader. If the leader got killed on the battlefields, it was over. In the Jerusalem area in 48, the leader of the Arab forces, Abd Qadir al-Husseini, was killed by mistake on the outskirts of Jerusalem, and they lost Jerusalem. That's all it took, because he was their Napoleon. And without Abd Qadir al-Husseini, they couldn't fight. He was the only one who could lead them. Whereas with us, when we lost the Castel hill on the way to Jerusalem, where 300 Talmach members died and 3 survived. One of them was Yitzhak Rabin, and the other one was my geography professor at the school in Haifa. Imagine what a battle that was. We didn't lose the battle. We did. Most other armies would have lost the battle. The concept of leadership was so well established at the outset. That was the secret of our success. Everybody, I must say one thing about Jews. God bless us. We are not followers, we Jews. My wife doesn't follow me. She tells me what to do. And I argue with her and I tell her what to do. And somehow we will soon be celebrating our 60th wedding anniversary, okay? In spite of the fact that we, have minds of our own. That's very Jewish. 3 Jews, we used to say in Israel, 5 opinions. But that is, and the thing about Moses, he listened to his father-in-law Jethro when Jethro visited him in the desert during the Exodus, and Jethro said, Moses, you're working so hard, you'll kill yourself. And Moses listened, and he reorganized the community, the 12 tribes, and the judges and everything else. And as Max Dimon says in his famous book, Jews, God, and History, he says, this was the first democracy in history, 500 years before Athens and the Greeks established democracy. Interesting concept.
I want to talk about, I think one of the most important things about leadership, and bring up some midrashim about when leaders get upset or when leaders make mistakes or leaders have to recalibrate. I think the ability to recalibrate is one of the greatest characteristics of leadership. And so I have a couple of midrashim that I'll just share about probably Moses's most significant moment of recalibration, which was the shattering of the first set of tablets with the 10 Commandments. And what these midrashim show is that you would think, like, God inscribed these tablets and Moses destroyed them and the people were worshiping the golden calf. And, you would think that it would be, tragic for Moses. And what these couple of midrashim show is that it was the opposite, that it elevated Moses in a way. The first, Philip, do you mind unmuting and reading Exodus 34:1? This is go ahead.
Yep.
Excuse me. The Lord said to Moses, carve 2 tablets of stone like the first, and I will inscribe upon the tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you shattered.
Right. So this is the moment. And already you have think about if you've someone, if you're, a child or a grandchild or someone you mentor and they're upset and they're overwrought and they're feeling just bad. And you say to them, calm down, take a deep breath, go take a walk outside, take a break. And God does this with Moses. Moses broke the tablets and God says, go make a second set, do it again, wipe yourself off. You did something, because it acknowledges that Moses shattered them that's there. So Philip, do you mind reading? I'll move it up so you'll be able to read it. The Lord said,
Okay.
This is from Ibn Israel.
The Lord said, carve lecha, like lech lecha, take lecha. Okay. And the meaning of like the first is like the measurements and of the same stone. And Gaon said that the second set were more
chubad, they're more kavod worthy, honorific.
Okay. Than the first, because the second set was given on a holy day, on Yom Kippur, and such was not true of the first. They came down on the 17th of Tammuz and on a regular day. The first ones were broken. They were like a dream thing. They didn't go up, they didn't go down. Both of them were writing of God and more. The first were made entirely by God, and the second, the work of Moses and God.
So before we go in the Midrash, Rabbi Schreiber, what this Midrash says, and I think what your book says, is Moses made things better. He brought something to the table that no one else brought. And what that Midrash does is it says that the second set, there wouldn't have been a second set that even existed if the first set wasn't broken, but the second set were better because it was 40 days from the 17th of Tammuz when the first set was broken to Yom Kippur, when it's supposed that that Moses came down with the second set, that the first set was gone and broken, and the second set was there, though supposedly the children of Israel carried both. And if you think about just inventions and how many things, what is it? Necessity is the mother of invention. That the second set were only invented because the first set were broken in response to this idol worship. And it just implies that anything that Moses was connected with just made things better. So Rabbi, how does Moses make things better for us? And how in emulating Moses are we better?
Well, I think what I take from this particular interpretation of make a second set of tablets, I take it to mean that human beings are a work in progress. History is a work in progress. Life. You don't, do thing once and that's it. It's forever. It's an ongoing process. And Moses had to take a people who lived for, I think, 400 years in Egypt in slavery. And aside from a second set of tablets, by the way, he had to keep them wandering in the desert for 40 years so that an entire generation, the generation that was born in slavery, would run its course, and that he would enter the promised land with a new generation, because those were not ready to be free people. So in other words, he understood what it meant to confront Pharaoh, to get them out of slavery, out of Egypt, to bring them through the desert for 40 years, and to get them to the gates of the promised land where God didn't let him get in. He said, you die on Mount Nebo, you know, in Jordan, Transjordan, and they will enter the land with Joshua. This whole process is amazing. It's amazing. It is so real and so true. Here we are in the United States in 2021. And back in the 60s, as a young rabbinical student, I was very deeply involved in the struggle for civil rights here in the United States. And we thought by now that we have really moved on. We never in our wildest dreams imagined that what's been happening in the last 4 years could happen in this country, and still happening yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We already been to that movie, done it, been there, done it. We are now in the 21st century. What's happening? What's happening is that human history is not a continuous progression from point A to B and C. Human history, like my niece in England says to me, a very smart young woman, she says, human history is like the waves of the ocean. Goes in, goes out, we make mistakes, we forget, we have to start over. It's a constant struggle. And you know, if you study philosophy, if you study the ancient Greeks, if you study Nietzsche, Nietzsche used to say, life is a struggle. And you have to accept it, and you have to roll with the punches. I was kicked this morning out of my apartment because they're doing work, electric work in my building, and I'm sitting here in a makeshift corner of the boardroom, and I didn't even get a chance to put on a nice shirt. You know what? And here we are. We're doing it anyway, and it's great, and it's working. Moses understood these things, and I think I just had a new insight, and you raising this question, you gave me a new idea, which I think is a good idea. Moses taught us how to survive for thousands of years. We are among the most adaptable people in human history. You know, people have come and gone throughout history forever. A lot of the people of antiquities are not here anymore. The people of Egypt are not the ancient Egyptians. They are Arabs who came into Egypt. What's left of the old Egyptians is the Coptic Christians. They were there before the Muslims got in. So the world population keeps changing all the time. Who remains? Who's still there for 5 millennia? Jews. Well, maybe the Chinese. I don't know, but most people don't last. We lasted because of Moses, because he gave us the tools to adapt, to understand. Because of him, we had the oral Torah, the Talmud, the interpretations. It is only in recent times that sections of Jewry became rigid, became, unwilling to move on. But we Reformed Jews, we know what it means to move on. We've done it.
I want to share.
Moses is the source. Yep.
I want to share another midrash in this series, which has a beautiful parable in it. Lorraine, are you able to read? Is that from where you're sitting? I gotta have you unmute. Are you able to unmute? Perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you can pick up where, so they requote this. If you'd be a little bit louder and when God here, so from here, when God spoke of the second tablets.
When God spoke of the second tablets being like the first ones, the reference was to the writing, not to the material they were made of.
So this is getting into that, like what Rabbi Schreiber is saying about kind of recalibrating and handling what comes your way. Like, it's not important what they were on. What's important is what was said. Keep going. The first tablet.
The first tablets were made of material provided by God, not material provided by man, which Moses carried all the way up the mountain. Shemot Rabbah states that the instruction to Moses to carve for himself 2 stone tablets is an illustration of what Solomon had in mind and Kohen
Ecclesiastes, yeah, it's a Kohelet. Yeah.
Ecclesiastes, when he said, "There is a time to throw stones away and another time to assemble stones." He first referred to Moses, who had smashed the first set of tablets, wherein in the second half of his statement, he referred to God's instruction to Moses to carve for himself 2 stone tablets, as mentioned in our verse.
And I'm just going to move this up. The latter statement. Sorry, you're up here now.
Okay, I lost my place.
Actually,
Yeah,
so
that's it.
I just want to jump down a little bit. Here, another meaning of the words
Another-
carve for yourself. Yeah.
Another meaning of the words carve for yourself. The matter can be illustrated by means of a parable. A king took a trip across abroad overseas, leaving his wife and the various female servants of the palace behind. The queen now became the subject of the same kind of cheap gossip as is invariably spread about such servants. When these tales reached the ears of the king, he wanted to execute his queen. When a companion of the queen who had been a witness to the marriage heard about this, he tore up the marriage settlement which had been given to him for safekeeping. He reasoned that if the king were to accuse his wife of misconduct, he would tell him that she was not his wife anymore, seeing she had no marriage settlement. The king examined the reports that had reached him, did not find any substance in them. Only accusations against the maidservants could be substantiated. He immediately changed his mind, and his wife became very dear to him again. Thereupon, the witness who had previously torn up the marriage contract said to the king, "Please write a new marriage contract for your wife." The king responded that seeing that it was the witness who had torn up the original, it was up to him to provide the means to write a replacement. The king was willing, however, to do the writing on the replacement contract. This is the reason God said to Moses, "Carve for yourself."
So there's this, just in being in proximity with Moses, there's such resonance. I just want to show you the last midrash here because it shows such power. It's it's a very funny Gemara. Do you want to read? It is brought in the Gemara.
The Lord said to Moses, "Carve 2 tablets of stone like the first, and I will inscribe upon the tablets the words that were on the first tablets which you shattered." It is brought in the Gemara, Yasher Koah, that you broke it was difficult for Moses, very difficult, the breaking of the tablets. And thus God showed him that in truth above there is no separation. Only in this world do they appear as split.
Right. So the words still endure. I think it's also like Moses was supposedly very strong. I don't know if you remember, he killed or accused of killing the Egyptian taskmaster and just had a physical strength about him. What do you think, Rabbi Schreiber? What did you teach in the book about what are Moses's greatest strengths and greatest weaknesses?
Well, the thing is that the Bible, the Torah, goes out of its way to show us that Moses was a human being, and he lost his temper, in the desert when the people told him to bring water from the rock. And he says that you rebellious people, and we put it from the rock, I should bring water. He really could bring the water, but he felt that they didn't trust him, and he was annoyed. The Bible presents him as a very real person. He's not a divine being or above reproach. He has human failings. I think, to me, by the way, the most endearing thing about our scriptures, about our Bible, it is so humane. It's humanizing. This business about breaking the tablets, bringing another set. If you're a writer, you have to take a chapter and throw it away because you realize it was not the right thing. And so you start over again. That's the way it works. And so you're not you're showing an example to your people. If you build something, it was not quite right and you got to rebuild it, take the time, do it, because it's in the end, you will do something better. So I think this kind of a behavior, this kind of flexibility that we see here is very important for people to understand. My guess is when there were slaves in Egypt, and the taskmaster didn't like what they did, they were severely punished. There was no mercy, there was no understanding. He had to teach our forebears who came out of Egypt that, that's not how a good society works. A good society, has to be able to roll with the punches, move on, admit mistakes, and do the right thing.
You mentioned earlier what you learned about Islam and Moses and how frequently he's mentioned. I just want to share a little bit from the book, this beautiful piece that's from the stories of the prophets, a Quranic text. And then I want you to share what you learned from your co-authors about their religions and about Moses. But let me just get on my share screen. Sorry. Where are you? Hold on, let me get to okay. This is a segment from the book. I'm assuming that you each wrote the parts that when you included the text from your own faith tradition, that you wrote those sections. Here we go. Okay. So this is from the book. According to Rabbi Yaakov Halevi Pilber, Rosh Yeshiva in Israel, the submission of Moses, this is the midrash about Moses and the shepherd that we talked about last time. A leader should be a good shepherd of people, be trustworthy, and be humble. In Arabic, the word for submission is Islam. In the 14th century Muslim commentary, Stories of the Prophet, so that's about 700 years after the beginning of Islam, by renowned Quranic scholar Ibn Kathir, Moses' life with the Midianites is described as this. Phyllis, are you able to unmute and read this section here?
I'll try. I'm on my cell phone.
Okay, here I'll make it a little bit larger for you. Is that big enough? Wait, hold on.
Okay. All right.
It was a period of major preparation.
Yes. All right. It was a period of major preparation. Certainly Moses's mind was absorbed in the stars every night. He followed the sunrise and the sunset every day. He pondered on the plant and how it splits the soil and appears thereafter. He contemplated water and how the earth is revived by it and flourishes after its death. In addition to physical preparation, there was a similar spiritual preparation. It was made in complete seclusion in the middle of the desert and in the places of pasture. Silence was his way of life and seclusion was his vehicle. Allah, the Almighty, prepared for his prophet the tools he would need later on to righteously hear the commands of Allah, the Exalted.
So this minutia, this attention to every detail, reminds me of there's a beautiful poem by, I think it's William Blake, to see a world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wildflower, to hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour, just to have that contemplation. That also reminds me, there's a great book called After the Ecstasy, the Laundry, which is about people, you can't live in that, contemplating how the plant sprouts out. But that's from a Muslim text. Rabbi Schreiber, why don't you tell us and then we'll open it up to questions from those here, or anything else you want to add. What sticks with you from your colleagues that you learned about their faith tradition and about Moses from them?
Yes, they gave the Moses stories here and there a different veneer, a different twist, because they were thinking of their experience, their life, what they understood. For example, to them, Aaron, Moses' brother, is also a prophet. I don't believe in Judaism we call Aaron a prophet. No, Miriam is a prophet, but not Aaron. So we have our own, pantheon of who we. They had to adjust what I guess Muhammad, because the way the whole Islam started is that in the Arabian Peninsula, there were Jewish tribes that lived there, and also there were Christians. And Muhammad actually heard stories from the Torah and from the New Testament from these. Some of them were, traveling merchants that he came across. And he was obviously very inspired by both the Old and the New Testament. And he was looking for a way to make them, adapt them to the experience of the Arabian tribes that followed him. So naturally, you're not getting an exact replica of what our Torah says. You're getting some other, but the beautiful thing about the way they tell you about Moses in the Quran is that it is always very humane, very gentle, very wise. There's nothing that I can take exception to, and feel uncomfortable about. On the contrary, I'm very comfortable with what they say, even though it's not always the same, because they had to have, I think what happens with the three religions, each one of them had to have their own way of saying it, of doing it, that worked for them. For example, the nations who became Christian, the first were the European nations, the Greeks and Romans and Europe. They needed a divine being. They made Jesus the Son of God in order for them to be able to convert their people to Christianity. The Muslim didn't have these problems. They don't have a Son of God. Allah is unique and beyond anything human. Very big difference in Islam and Christianity. We Jews, we originated the whole thing. We have the first version, if you will, the old tablets. But nevertheless, monotheism and the religions of the West wouldn't exist without this little small people called the Hebrews or the Jews. So, different roles played by different populations. And when you read the Quran, it has a lot of life wisdom. It has a lot of things that we can learn from. One of the great things in my life has been my interest in comparative religion. I have all my life read scriptures of Western religion, Eastern religions, you name it. I'm interested in all of them. Stories of creation all over the world. It's amazing how the Mayan and the Inca in Latin America came up with their stories of creation. In Hawaii, the world has so many versions of how the world was created. It's fabulous, because in the end, we're all talking about the same thing, but we do it in different ways.
Absolutely. I want to open it up if anyone has any questions or comments about the book or what Rabbi has said. Right. I'm going to share this next week. I'm going to share in the chat. Rabbi Stephen Moss is with us. Actually, pull the book up so you can see it. Rabbi Moss is newer to Florida. He's very active. Did you know Rabbi Moss in?
No.
Okay.
No, he's after my time. Yeah.
Is that right? So he wrote. It says Rabbi Schreiber and he both wrote books during this last year and reached out to share them. And his is a little bit more personal, though. Rabbi Schreiber, you've also written personal books,
Yeah, yeah.
from your own perspective. God is with me. I have
Right.
no fear. The spiritual life of a rabbi, and it's meeting to you. And it's funny. Ann Patchett, who's a great author, has a great piece about like, is there a book inside everyone or not? Because everyone says they have a book inside of them, but she's like, no, because not everyone has a cure for cancer inside of them, and not everyone has, the next great technological invention. But I think a lot of us like have a book inside of us. So you've written 45, you said you've written
65.
65 books. So if someone has a book inside of them, what's the best way for that book to come out, having written so many books and also being in the world of translation and publishing as well?
Well, the truth of the matter is we have reached a point in time now, particularly here in the United States, that anybody can write a book, publish a book, promote it, and so on. I've had different publishers publish my books over the years. The very first one was a very big publisher when I first started. But in the last few years, I had some ideas for books that were not easy to market or easy to convince a publisher to do them. You can now contact Amazon. Amazon has a self-publishing system that is absolutely marvelous. They will typeset, they will set the book for you. They'll do the cover design for you, which I didn't have to do because my daughter is a dean of Parsons and she's a designer. she designed my covers. The cost is very, I'm not doing a commercial here for Amazon. It's not my intent, but that's the truth. Let's face it. I was able to publish what I think is a marvelous little book called The Sage. Life's Key 49 Questions, whatever, which are also illustrated. And I published it privately, hardly cost me anything. And so I didn't invest money in it. And Amazon, the reason they enable you to do this is because, they like to have more books to sell. Oh, there's the book. There it is.
There you go.
There it is.
It's free on
that's one
Kindle.
of my favorites. Yeah.
There you go.
It's life wisdom, an older man telling a younger man what life is about. And I don't know, it gave me so much pleasure to write this book that I'm thrilled I did it. And I hope someday maybe a publisher will take it on anyway. Things happen. The publishing business is very strange, very convoluted, very, very. And the other problem is that there's so many books coming out these days. Every time somebody sneezes, there's a new book. Politicians, they just throw out books like there's no end to it. The market is very overflooded. So if you cannot get a commercial publisher or academic publisher, then just contact outfits, not just Amazon. There's a few like these that do this. Some of the big distributors do it. Can't think of the names right now, but it's not hard. We have reached a stage in time that anybody can write, anybody can be a writer. And you know what? It's not all about making money, because let's say you have a great life story that you want to bequeath to your children and grandchildren and friends, etc. I wrote a book about my life that I haven't yet published because it's really sort of like for the family. But someday, I'm sure it'll come out. And it's a wonderful thing to do, to tell the story of your life, no matter who you are. Because yes, I do believe we all have a story in us. I disagree with the author. You mentioned that we don't have a cure for cancer. But okay, there's only one Dr. Salk and Dr. Sabin who gave us the cure for polio. But a story, every human being has a story. I don't care who it is. Every human being has a story. And every story is worth telling. Each one of us is a story. Am I still talking?
I froze. I don't know if you can hear me or not.
Yes, yes.
Okay, I froze and got kicked off, but I'm back again. The last thing you said, that anyone can publish anything, I think is the esprit de corps of millennials writ large, that with access to video like
Yeah,
YouTube and Facebook, that millennials, that generation, I would say it's between Rabbi Weissman and my son. Like that's how I bookend the
Yeah.
millennials. My son's
Yeah.
21 and Rabbi Weissman, I think, is 36. That they were taught that anything is possible, that you can make
Exactly.
yourself famous and all that. And so
Yes.
it's appropriate way to end with
You know,
that, with that
Andy Warhol
sentiment.
told us we all have 15 minutes of fame.
Right. Now we really get it for sure. Well, thank you so much.
Sure.
As I said, the next 2 weeks, we have Rabbi Steve Moss with
Yeah.
us. We want to wish everyone well and good. There's some wonderful programming for Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel Independence Day this week, including Thursday morning. If you liked Rabbi Matt Berkowitz with us last month, he's back with us this Thursday morning for art and Zionism. Two amazing topics I love tremendously. And again, Rabbi Schreiber, thank you. Thank you.
It seems the internet went down again at Temple. Thank you so much for joining us. We're back here next week at 12 p.m. Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody.